The church bells were supposed to sound like a hymn of joy. Instead, to Amelia they clanged like alarm bells, each strike echoing dread in her restless chest. She stood just beyond the carved double doors, veil pinned into her brown curls, bouquet trembling in hands cold as ice. Everyone she had ever known sat inside, family, friends, co-workers, curious neighbors, waiting to see her step into a future that promised security, luxury, and status. But not love. Her father's voice whispered sternly behind her, "Remember, this is what we've worked for. A family alliance, stability, a safe life. Do not embarrass us now." The words jolted again through her. She glanced across the aisle at the man she was meant to marry, Matthew, wealthy son of her father's business partner. His smile was polite, handsome on the surface, but it had never reached his eyes. He had mentioned once, half drunk, that their marriage would be mutually beneficial. He wasn't cruel, but he spoke of her like asset, never soulmate. Inside Amelia something rebelled. Maybe it had been years of swallowing silence, maybe it was the glimpse of her reflection moments before, the veil hiding a woman she barely recognized. Whatever the spark, it burned furious now, fed by pounding bells. The organ swelled. The priest nodded. The doors began to open. And Amelia moved. Not forward, but sideways, trembling fingers clutching the gown's skirts as she bolted through a side door and into open air. Gasps erupted behind her, attendants frozen, but she didn't stop. She sprinted down the stone steps, white satin brushing against gravel, heels sparking like gunfire on the pavement. Her lungs burned. Her heart screamed freedom louder than bells. "Amelia," voices bellowed behind. But she flew faster, veil tearing loose into the wind until only wild curls remained. The road stretched before her, rural and empty, glistening under the setting sun. Guests spilled from the chapel steps, her father shouting, Matthew stunned, but Amelia was already gone, the gown like a ghost trailing across the horizon. For the first time in 26 years she was not obeying. She was not polite. She was not the careful daughter or agreeable fiancée. She was simply a runaway, desperate to live on her own terms. Dust sent up by her frantic running clung to her dress when headlights appeared from the bend in the road. A car slowed, hesitant at the sight of a bride sprinting breathless, bouquet crushed in her hands. The window rolled down. A man leaned out, messy dark hair falling across his forehead, eyes striking with confusion and concern. His worn jacket, slightly oil-stained, contrasted violently against her satin gown. You okay?" he asked carefully, incredulity softened by an undercurrent of kindness. Amelia froze briefly at the edge of the road, veil tossed in tall grass behind her. Chest heaving, throat dry, she whispered hoarse, "I can't go back." The stranger's brows furrowed. "Did someone hurt you? Do you need help?" She clutched her bouquet until petals wilted. "I don't need help. I need a way. Just a way." He studied her, non-judgmental despite the absurdity before him. A runaway bride, dust-staining once perfect white silk. She braced for mockery. Instead, he asked quietly, "Where do you want to go?" Her lips trembled with an answer she hadn't dared form. "Anywhere that isn't chosen for me." Pause. His eyes softened, decision made. "Get in." Without hesitation, for hesitation meant capture, Amelia slid into the car. The seats smelled faintly of leather and motor oil. Her gown filled the passenger side awkwardly, crumpled like rebellion itself. The man glanced at her again, half a smile tugging one corner of his mouth. "Not exactly how I pictured today going," he muttered. Her hysterical laugh startled them both. "Not how I pictured mine either." The tires spun back into motion, carrying Amelia away from bells, away from shattered expectations, away from a life mapped by someone else's pen. For the first time the air in her lungs felt like hers to breathe. Silence stretched as countryside blurred outside. Then the stranger asked gently, "Name?" She turned, veil-freed curls brushing her cheeks, and for once she did not answer with the identity bound to family alliances. She whispered softly, "Amelia?" "Daniel," he replied. "Well, Amelia, looks like you just jumped out of forever. Guess now we see what comes next." Her heart stuttered strangely at his casual acceptance. Almost no shock, almost no demand for explanation. Just quiet companionship offered in worn jacket voice. For the first time since she tore free, Amelia let her head rest against the car's seat, dress crumpled around her, bouquet forgotten at her lap. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in streaks of gold over fields. She didn't know where the road bent, what lay beyond, or who this man really was. But she knew one thing with rare, defiant clarity. Her life had just changed forever. The soft hum of the engine drowned out Amelia's racing thoughts as the car cut along the winding country road. She could still hear the bells ringing faintly in her memory, as though they tagged after her like phantom chains, insisting she belonged back at the altar. Her hands gripped her lap, twisting the wilted bouquet until petals crumbled onto crumpled satin. Daniel didn't press her. He drove at a steady pace, eyes mostly on the road, but she noticed the occasional flicker of a glance in her direction, as if making sure she hadn't dissolved into panic mid-seat. That silence was strangely comforting. After years of dinners where men spoke for her, sealed deals with her name like paperwork, this silence felt like choice. Finally, he broke it with a half-smile. "So, runaway bride. Does your story end here or are we starting chapter 2? Amelia startled, then blinked. Heat rose to her cheeks. "I don't even know what chapter I'm in. All I know is I couldn't do it." Daniel nodded like her words made perfect sense. No judgment. No disbelief. Just acceptance. "Yeah. I figured. People don't sprint in white satin unless something in their soul's on fire." A laugh, nervous and raw, escaped Amelia. "You make it sound noble." It felt more like desperation. Sometimes desperation is just courage not wearing its shoes yet. She turned to him then, properly studying the messy hair, the oil-stained jacket, the slight shadow of stubble along his jawline. He didn't look like any man from her father's circle. His shoulders weren't carried with the pride of generational wealth. His voice didn't flatten emotions into transactions. He looked real. "What do you do?" she asked suddenly, wanting context. Daniel smirked at the road. "What I do? Well, on good days I fix machines that pretend they're smarter than people. On bad days I tow cars for those who think they can outrun physics." She frowned playfully. "So you're a mechanic? And sometimes an ambulance for engines. A translator for noises under hoods. A magician resurrecting rusted death traps." His humor softened the picture, though his eyes remained sincere. "Yeah. Mechanic more or less. And sometimes an ambulance for engines. A translator for noises under hoods. A magician resurrecting rusted death traps." His humor softened the picture, though his eyes remained sincere. "Yeah. Mechanic more or less." It was absurdly grounding. She tilted against the seat, letting his words roll in the wake of adrenaline still flooding her veins. A mechanic had stopped. A mechanic had picked her up. Maybe the universe knew she needed fixing too. "I've never even pumped my own gas," Amelia admitted quietly, eyes on the passing fields. "Maybe it's ridiculous, but I don't know how to belong outside of what I was told to be." Daniel's voice came even. "Doesn't sound ridiculous to me. Just sounds like no one ever let you try." Her throat tightened. No lecture. No condescension. Just empathy stated plain. He surprised her again when he asked, "Hungry?" pointing at a looming diner lit neon in the distance. The thought of walking into a public space in this gown made her want to vanish. "I can't, like this." Daniel grinned. "Relax. People might stare, but small towns talk about escaped brides like legends. You'll tip better than Elvis sightings." Despite herself, Amelia laughed, the sound catching her off guard. And she realized she wasn't ruined yet. She was alive in motion. They parked, and Daniel shrugged off his jacket. "Here. Won't hide the gown, but it'll cut the headlines. You look less like a princess and more like a girl who made a run for it." She slipped into his jacket, sleeves long past her fingertips, smelling faintly of engine grease and rain. Something inside her loosened. Not polished. Not perfect. Just human. Inside, the diner buzzed with fluorescent lights and chatter. Heads did turn, but Daniel carried her to a booth like it was the most ordinary evening of his life. "2 coffees?" he called amiably to the waitress. Amelia, still trembling under curious eyes, hissed softly, "Why are you so calm?" Daniel shrugged. "Because panicking never fixes anything. Besides, it's not every day fate throws me a bride in distress on the road." Her lips twitched, surrendering slightly. For the first time she found herself sipping coffee not chosen by a carefully hovering waiter, but poured steaming and imperfect into a chipped mug. And somehow, it tasted freer than anything champagne could ever offer. They didn't talk about the church. They didn't talk about Matthew or her family's anger. They talked instead of small things. Daniel remembered fixing his first car at 17. Amelia admitted she used to sneak novels into bed and dream of traveling. Their laughter rose quietly, weaving into air heavy with fried food and jukebox hum. And slowly she felt the veil of runaway shame thinning into possibility. When they crossed back into night air, stars scattered brilliantly overhead, Daniel asked, almost nonchalant, "So what now? Run forever? Or just long enough to become something true?" Her gaze met his, trembling and fierce at once. "I don't know. But for the first time I want to choose." He nodded, unlocking the car. "Then maybe I'm just your chauffeur until you figure it out. But make no mistake, Amelia, people who choose, eventually find where they belong." Her name on his lips rattled her with unfamiliar warmth. For years it had been spoken in commands, in businesslike tones, in arrangements. Tonight, from him it sounded alive. The ride stretched quiet, but her mind spun. She wasn't naive, she knew her father would explode at her disappearance, knew Matthew would feel humiliated, knew gossip would devour her in hours. But she was learning, in Daniel's company, that sometimes ruin was the only doorway to freedom. And maybe, just maybe, the road she had taken wasn't an escape at all. It was an arrival. By the next morning the world knew. The story of the runaway bride had sprouted like dandelions through cracks. Someone had filmed her sprinting from the chapel, satin skirts flying behind. Another had captured her diving into Daniel's car and speeding away. Within hours it trended across social networks. Headlines blared. Wealthy heiress abandons groom at the altar in daring escape. Mystery man aids fugitive bride. Who is he? Amelia's phone, still buried inside Daniel's glove compartment where she'd hurled it, buzzed endlessly, vibrations angry as bees. Dozens of missed calls screamed her father's name. Messages multiplied, a storm of angry demands, broken pleas and cold threats. "Where are you? Come back immediately. You've destroyed everything. You have no idea the humiliation you've caused." Her stomach clenched, nausea rising. The very thing she had fled, the suffocation, the transactional certainty, had followed in pursuit with teeth bared. She pressed her palms against her eyes in Daniel's car, whispering hoarse, "They'll never let me live free." Daniel glanced at her before turning back to the road. "Maybe. Or maybe they've lost their power. Because only you can decide whether to answer." His calm bewildered her, struck her like water on fire. "You don't understand. My father built his company's future on this union. Matthew's family invested. My runaway, it's chaos. They'll ruin me to salvage pride." Daniel shrugged. Not dismissive, steady. "Then they'll learn you're not an asset. You're a woman. Women don't get ruined for taking back their lives." The words, so simple, so alien to her world, cracked something in her. They stopped at his small apartment above the garage where he worked. The bedroom was little more than worn wood floors, a patched armchair, and shelves lined with books greasy at the corners from living near machinery. It smelled faintly of gasoline, leather, and coffee grounds. To Amelia, it felt like the first honest air she had breathed in years. He lent her old clothes, a faded t-shirt and sweats swallowing her wholesale. For the first time since childhood, she slept without lace choking her. The following afternoon, the storm found her anyway. Her father arrived in a black car, flanked by two cousins, their suits sharp as drawn blades. He stormed into Daniel's garage, fury flaming in his voice. "You've disgraced us, Amelia," he thundered, ignoring Daniel entirely. "What have you done to this family? To our name? Do you understand the loss?" Amelia recoiled, instinct screaming obedience. But something rooted her feet. She straightened, chest trembling but spine unyielding. "I understand I almost married a man I didn't love. I understand I nearly spent my life as bargaining chip. I won't do it, father. I won't." Gasps echoed from the cousins. Her father's face darkened, disbelief strangling him. "You think the world cares about your childish notions of love? You think reputation is a toy? Return now, apologize, or consider yourself cut off, erased." Daniel stepped forward then, wrench in hand still smeared from his work. Not threatening, steady. His eyes locked on Amelia's father with measured fire. "With respect, sir, threatening doesn't change truth. She's not property." "Stay out of this," her father spat. "This is family." "No," Amelia snapped suddenly, her voice laced with defiance that startled even her. "This is me." The words cut deeper than any rebellion she had ever dared. Years of silence cracked open in one sentence. Her father stared, momentarily stunned at her resolve. He turned cold, then withdrawing like winter. "Very well. You've chosen disgrace. You'll regret this. And when you come crawling back, there will be nothing left to welcome you." He stormed out, cousins in tow, slamming the door like punctuation. Silence quaked afterward, Daniel watching her, cautious. Amelia trembled against the counter, knees weak. "He'll follow through," she whispered. "No inheritance. No contact. He'll burn me out of the family entirely." Daniel set his wrench down slowly. "Then maybe that's the price of life on your own terms. Painful, yes. But weren't you dying a little each day already?" Her breath was ragged, tears clinging but stubbornly unshed. "Yes, I was." "Then choose life," Daniel said gently. That night she wept into his jacket, clinging to unfamiliar safety. And though fear gnawed deep, of poverty, of exile, of whispers painting her villain, something stronger bled against her fear, relief. For the first time her life was hers. The days after turned fragile but fragrant. She worked odd jobs with Daniel, learning to sweep garages, wipe grease, brew coffee strong enough to keep weary mechanics awake. Occasionally someone recognized her from headlines. Sometimes whispers returned, "Princess fallen, heiress ruined." But while they judged, Daniel grinned, teaching her how to change oil, how to hold tools, how to wipe dirt proudly into knuckles. And at night, for the first time, she fell asleep not rehearsing duties but dreaming of possibilities. Across the city, society spat fury. Matthew's family announced financial withdrawal from her father's ventures. Newspapers painted her both villain and hero. Some pitied her naive rebellion, others lauded courage. But Amelia didn't read anymore. She lived. She learned to fry eggs for the first time. To laugh without covering her mouth. To drive Daniel's old pickup, grinding gears clumsily while he howled encouragement beside her. Was it glamorous? No. Was it freedom? Every breath of it. And though danger still thrummed, her father's threats hung like thunderclouds, the storms inside her steadily calmed. What she didn't realize yet was that fate wasn't finished. That the man who picked her up on the road that day wasn't some accident, but a stranger whose role in her life was only beginning. And he, too, carried a story that would someday change hers forever. 4 weeks, Amelia's universe narrowed to Daniel's garage apartment. The hum of engines below, the smell of coffee he brewed so bitter it nearly sparked tears, the clatter of wrenches on concrete, laughter drifting up despite grease-stained days. She no longer woke to bells of obligation. She woke to her own heartbeat, to possibility, and sometimes to his quiet knock at her door with breakfast proudly massacred on a plate. In the beginning, she thought of Daniel as her rescuer by accident. The man fate placed on a bend in the road when she sprinted from her cage. But slowly, carefully, she began to sense layers beneath his calm, the edges of someone who carried storms of his own. It was little things. The way he sometimes paused before answering questions too personal. The way his jaw tightened when Suits walked past the garage. The way he'd stare at his own reflection in greasy glass, sometimes as if daring it to accuse him. One evening, curiosity pressed harder than she could resist. They sat on the roof, the city glimmering beyond fields, stars pricking dark skies. She tugged her borrowed sweater tighter and whispered, "Why did you stop that day, Daniel?" He smirked at the night instead of her. "Because you looked like a ghost trying to flee her grave." "That's not an answer." He exhaled, finally meeting her gaze. Shadows folded across his eyes. "Truth? Because I know what it's like to run." Her breath caught. "Run from what?" He was silent for a long moment, then confessed, "From a destiny I didn't choose." She blinked, startled because the words struck like a mirror echoing her own. "I grew up in Chicago," he explained, voice lower. "My family owned investment firms, gleaming offices stacked in glass towers. My father decided when I was 12 that I'd follow him. Harvard at 18, MBA at 21, marrying the right girl before 30. I wore tuxedos to dinners where they used words like inevitable. Until the night I realized their inevitable was my tomb. Amelia leaned closer, eyes wide. So you left. One midnight I walked away. Left trust funds, left suits, left my father shouting that I was dead to him. I swapped silk ties for wrenches. A small smirk curved his lips. Turns out engines tell truth better than contracts do. Her chest throbbed. All this time she thought him ordinary, grounded by some fortunate humility. But he too had severed ties from a golden cage not unlike hers. You chose your own life, she whispered, awe lacing every syllable. And you did too, he said softly, locking her gaze. That's why I stopped. Because I saw in your sprint the same fire I once carried when I escaped. Silence stretched between them, not awkward, awed. For the first time Amelia realized she wasn't alone in her rebellion. She wasn't just some reckless heiress scorched by shame. She was standing with a man forged by similar flames. But you, how do you survive without it? Without the money, the connections, the safety net? She murmured. By working, he answered simply. By realizing blistered hands are cleaner than gold shackles. By being poor but free. His words reverberated strange in her chest. Poor but free. She thought of her crumpled gown abandoned in tall grass, of her father's rage, of Matthew's polished indifference. Poor perhaps, but freer than she'd ever been. He leaned back on his hands, eyes searching stars. You think I gave you something when I drove you away that night? But truth? You reminded me why I left. You showed me I wasn't insane for wanting more than a throne someone else carved. Amelia whispered, and what do you want now? He tilted his head, catching her eyes fully. The night air hummed between them. You. Free. The confession shattered breath in her lungs. 1,000 fears screamed possible ruin. It was too soon, too reckless, her family's shadow too heavy. And yet the truth echoed fierce through her. She wanted him too. But before she could speak, headlights gleamed below in the garage lot. A black car. Suits again. Daniel swore softly, stood fast. Amelia froze, dread coiling. At least 4 men stepped out, polished shadows under dim street lamps. Their knock on the door thundered upstairs within seconds. Open up, one barked. We have business. Daniel motioned Amelia back into the bedroom. Stay here. No, Daniel. Stay. His tone broke no argument. When he opened the door, Amelia heard sharp voices. Demands. Threats. Her father had hired private investigators to drag her back. She heard them accuse Daniel of kidnapping, of corrupting, of scheming to profit. Daniel's voice cut cold, firm steel. She isn't your property. She chose. That's the end. Chaos followed, shoves, a scuffle, the slam of fists. Amelia's heart hammered as she grabbed the nearest thing, a heavy wrench on his dresser, and bolted out before reason stopped her. Stop, she yelled, eyes blazing at men twice her size. Her voice cracked like lightning, shaking the moment to still. I ran. I chose. You have no power here. Tell my father I'd rather scrub grease for the rest of my life than bow in chains again. Silence rang. The men faltered, maybe surprised by fire where they expected weakness. Daniel, scraped but not broken, stood taller behind her. You heard her. Leave. One by one, muttering about futures and ruined reputations, they withdrew. Tires shrieked into night. Amelia trembled, clutching the wrench until her fingers ached. Daniel gently pried it loose from her grip. His hand brushed through her curls, pulling back wild strands. Guess this means you're really not going back, he said softly. Her voice broke into something like laughter, something like tears. Never again. That night, curled against him under plain covers, Amelia realized 2 truths with bone-deep certainty. 1, Daniel wasn't just a mechanic. He was a soul who had already carried the rebellion she'd only just discovered. And 2, she had found not only her escape, but the compass pointing where life might finally begin. Morning light crept across Daniel's small apartment, painting the cracked floorboards in stripes of gold. Amelia stirred awake, cocooned in a borrowed blanket that smelled faintly of machine grease and coffee. For a moment, panic clawed. What had she done? She pictured her father's face, Matthew humiliated at the altar, the avalanche of gossip spreading like wildfire across newspapers and phones. But then her gaze shifted. Daniel lay in the chair near the bed, boots kicked carelessly off, asleep with his head tilted in exhaustion. And instead of dread, peace swept her. For the first time she had chosen her own dawn. The next days unfolded shockingly normal, almost like pieces of an entirely different life clicking into place. Amelia offered to help in the garage downstairs. At first Daniel laughed at the sight of her in his oversized coveralls, drowning in fabric. But his laugh wasn't mocking. It was soft, genuine, the kind of laugh that made her want to hear it again every day. "Here," he said, handing her a rag. "Your first lesson. Never wear white silk near oil filters." Her cheeks flushed as she admitted, "I don't even know what a filter looks like." "You will," he promised. And she did. Slowly, tenderly, Daniel taught her everything, from how to hold a wrench to checking oil levels, to what a carburetor even did, which she promptly forgot, and he joked she still deserved an award for trying. She ruined her nails permanently, cut her finger once or twice, and once dropped a ratchet hard enough to make him laugh for 5 full minutes. But underneath the clumsiness, she felt something extraordinary, competence blooming where family expectation had painted her useless. In the evenings they cooked horribly together. Daniel burned toast, she oversalted pasta, and they both laughed until aches carved into their stomachs. At night, they shared stories, his of skyscrapers and abandoned inheritances, once gilded dinners he had left behind, hers of silent dinners where she rehearsed smiling politely at Matthew while drowning inside. "You're braver than you think," Daniel told her one night. "Not everyone runs. Most sit in cages until the locks rust. You ran before it was too late." "I only ran because I saw the bars," she whispered. "If you hadn't been on that road, maybe I'd still be stumbling through them." His eyes softened. "Maybe. But maybe fate waits for people brave enough to notice the cracks. The road was waiting for you. I was just the driver." His words settled warm in her chest, seeds too delicate yet to name. But outside their narrow sanctuary, storms gathered. One afternoon, a group of men in suits loitered near the garage, clearly out of place among oil-smudged cars. Daniel stiffened immediately. "They're with your father?" he muttered. Amelia's heart plunged as the men inspected the building with thin contempt. They didn't storm, didn't fight, but the next morning, Daniel received a letter taped to the garage door. "New code violations. Excess fees due. Property under investigation for zoning compliance." Amelia ripped it off, hands trembling. "This isn't coincidence. He's coming after you." Daniel's jaw flexed. "Of course he is. Can't control his daughter, so he attacks the man who gave her a ride. Classic power move." Her throat burned. "He'll ruin you because of me." Daniel folded the paper calmly, meeting her eyes. "Then let him try. I've already lost wealth once. But I won't lose you." His steady defiance strengthened her, but guilt gnawed bitterly. She had fled her gilded prison, yes, but in tethering herself to Daniel, she had painted a target on his modest world. The next week fines piled. Inspectors appeared daily, nitpicking meaningless details. A cracked window, a misplaced tool. Customers dwindled, pressured by whispers that the garage was unsafe, doomed, blacklisted. One night, after shutters closed early, Amelia found Daniel sitting silent in the office, head bowed into his hands. She'd never seen him look defeated, not like this. "It's working," he murmured. "Your father thinks he can bleed me out one paper at a time." Her chest cracked with grief and rage. She dropped onto the seat beside him, gripping his wrist. "Then fight louder. Don't just endure. If they want war, don't surrender your truth." His eyes lifted, fiery despite exhaustion. "You sound like someone who's finally done being obedient." "I am." Her voice sharpened. "I've been silent for 26 years. No more." That very night she drafted a letter, not to her father, not to Matthew, but to the press. Her words spilled raw, unpolished, but fierce. She wrote of lives forced into cages for the sake of alliances, of daughters treated like documents, of freedom found in the collapse of expectations. She signed her name at the bottom without trembling. Daniel read it silently, pride blooming across his tired face. "So this is Amelia without chains." "Yes," she said, heart pounding. "And if he wants to attack you, he'll have to fight me in daylight, not in shadows." Daniel read it silently, pride blooming across his tired face. So this is Amelia without chains. Yes, she said, heart pounding. And if he wants to attack you, he'll have to fight me in daylight, not in shadows. Sneered on television, dismissing her as confused, and Matthew issued carefully worded insults. Power stirred beyond them. Because the world no longer saw Daniel as kidnapper or opportunist. They saw him as a man standing beside a woman carving her freedom. The fines didn't vanish instantly. The inspectors still came. But whispers in town flipped. Customers trickled back, boycotting corporations tied to her father. The garage light stayed on. And at night, under those flickering fluorescents, Amelia and Daniel sat together, tired but alive, their laughter returning in low, steady hums. That evening, staring at her emerald-painted words across the newsprint, Amelia realized something stunning. She had worried about Daniel losing everything because of her. But maybe together they were building something greater than both of them alone. Not ruin. Not war. But a new legacy born not from obedience, but from choice. The garage smelled of grease and gasoline, but Amelia would forever remember it differently, not as grime but as the place she bloomed. Each day she grew more accustomed to smudges on her cheeks, tired hands, and laughter echoing off the walls. Each evening she and Daniel walked upstairs covered in dirt and exhaustion, but with smiles, carrying something neither had known before: belonging. One late evening, after wrestling a stubborn engine into place, Daniel collapsed onto the floor, chest heaving with tired chuckles. Amelia sat beside him, grease streaking across her borrowed shirt like war paint. For a moment, they were simply two people who had chosen each other over every other life. Daniel tilted his head toward her, breathless. "You're actually good at this, you know?" Amelia laughed softly. "Please. I nearly dropped the carburetor on my foot." "You didn't," he countered, smirking. "You caught it. That's progress." He wiped his forehead before glancing at her. "Besides, it suits you." "What does?" "This life. Building things. Breaking free. Being messy. Real." Her chest tightened with warmth. No one had ever told her she suited anything other than polished appearances, orchestrated dinners, strategic alliances. To hear Daniel look at her, covered in grease, and declare it suited her, somehow it was the most romantic thing she'd ever been told. She murmured, almost too low for him to hear, "You suit me too." He froze slightly, eyes darting toward her. Silence swelled. The air shifted. And then he leaned closer, closing the gap, his hand brushing a stray curl from her cheek. Their breath mingled, pausing in suspended seconds. Finally, his lips pressed against hers, gentle at first, hesitant, searching. The kiss deepened as Amelia melted into him, bouquet long gone but an invisible garden blooming anyway inside her chest. She felt alive in ways satin gowns and gold bands never could have given her. This wasn't performance. It wasn't expectation. It was choice, wild and unperformed, shaping her into someone new. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Daniel whispered with wry humor, "Guess I really did pick up more than I bargained for on that road." Amelia pressed her forehead against his, laughter trembling with joy. "And I guess I found something better than forever at an altar." From that night onward, the air between them shifted. Their touches lingered. Their words softened. They weren't merely allies clinging to survival. They were becoming partners stitched together by devotion and shared fire. But love didn't silence storms. If anything, it sharpened what they now had to lose. Her father escalated again, furious at the public sympathy Amelia's article had stirred. He unleashed lawyers, demanding injunctions and painting Daniel as manipulator. News anchors debated shamelessly. Was Amelia truly free, or was she bewitched by a working-class opportunist? Amelia sat shaking one evening as anchors debated her autonomy on television like it was politics. Daniel muted the screen, kneeling before her, hand cupping her trembling jaw. "Hey, listen to me," he said, eyes fierce. "You don't need validation from anyone staring through cameras. You know the truth." "I know it. That's enough." She gripped his wrist, whispering, "But they won't stop until you're destroyed." "Let them try." His voice steadied. "They'll learn something I already know. Real love builds faster than their lies can tear down." His conviction carried her through the darkest nights. Slowly, Amelia began building bridges she never knew she wanted. She started baking again in Daniel's small kitchen, loaves of bread more symbolic than perfect. When customers visited the garage, she sometimes offered them slices, steaming warm. What began as kindness turned into ritual. Word spread, this was no longer just Daniel's garage. It was theirs. Journalists arrived curious, snapping photos of the heiress-turned-mechanic who served homemade bread in coveralls. But for once, the angle wasn't cruel. Runaway bride creates new life in garage, one headline wrote, almost admiring. Comments turned, pity became respect, mockery became fascination. And all the while, late at night, she and Daniel built a love raw and absolute. The reverence came not in diamonds or gowns but in how he kissed dirt smudges from her fingertips, how she whispered encouragement over his late-night paperwork, how they fought shoulder to shoulder against forces larger than both of them. It was during one such evening, curled together beneath a blanket in the old chair with rain thrumming softly on the roof, that Amelia whispered the words that had cracked inside her chest for weeks. "I love you, Daniel." Silence burst golden in the small room. Daniel stared, expression flickering between incredulity and wonder. He whispered her name like a prayer, "Amelia?" She nearly panicked, but he cupped her face quickly, pressing his lips against hers again, fiercer this time, answering with fire. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, his expression molten. "I love you too," he said, voice rough with certainty. "From the second you tore down that road like the world had finally remembered its heartbeat. I knew." Her tears slipped silently but joyfully, and she clung to him as if clinging to the life she had claimed that day. From then, love wasn't secret. It wasn't shy. It bloomed openly in grease-smudged garages, in sleepy breakfasts, in public smiles unbothered by gossip. And though their challenges sharpened, Amelia no longer shrank from them, because now she had something greater than courage. She had a partner. What she didn't know was that life wasn't done with defiance. That soon, opportunity and storm together would test whether her choice had been a sprint into freedom or a marathon into destiny. But one truth was unshakable in that fragile, breathtaking chapter of her life. Amelia Morgan had once been a runaway bride. Now she was a woman in love. The love between Amelia and Daniel felt like a defiant flame, burning hotter in the shadows cast by power and disapproval. But her father was not the type of man to watch a flame and let it grow. He was the type to smother it with every heavy hand available to him. The legal strike came on a Tuesday morning. Daniel opened his mailbox to find a thick envelope sealed with her father's firm's insignia. The words inside were as cruel as the intent behind them. Petition for guardianship. Claims of emotional instability and undue influence. Restraining order requested against Daniel Carter. In plain English, her father sought to have Amelia declared incapable of independent decision and placed under his control again, while painting Daniel as predator. The paper trembled in her hands as she read. "He's trying to erase me," she whispered, breath shaking. "Like my choices never happened. Like I'm broken." Daniel crushed the letter into his fist. "He can't. Not now, not after everything you've said and shown. We'll fight this." But for Amelia, the words cut raw. Her father's attack wasn't just legal maneuver, it was a declaration to the entire world that her rebellion was madness, not courage. If he won, all her fire would be branded delusion. The following week became chaos. Media networks ate every headline. Heiress against her father, runaway bride declared erratic, mechanic accused of manipulation in heiress's life. Strangers dissected her sanity as though it were a commodity. Every errand felt dangerous. Every trip to the grocery store came with eyes whispering, "Is she unstable?" Daniel tried his best to shield her, walking taller at her side, filing countersuits, hiring attorneys who believed in them. But the toll dragged across him too. Grease on his hands couldn't mend the weight of lawyers, the endless accusations twisting their story into circus acts. One evening Amelia found him in the office, hunched over invoices, exhaustion etched into lines that hadn't been there weeks ago. She touched his shoulder gently. "You're carrying this like Atlas. You'll break before it cracks." His eyes met hers, fierce but tired. "I refuse to let him take you." Tears filled her eyes. "Daniel, listen. My whole life people spoke for me. My father. Matthew. Everyone but me. If I let this fight become your burden, I'm no different than before. Let me stand with you, not behind. And so she did. At the first hearing, Amelia walked into the courthouse in plain clothes. Not silk, not status, but jeans and a steady gaze. The press swarmed the steps, shouting questions, but she spoke clearly into the microphones. I'm not broken. I'm not kidnapped. I chose my freedom and I choose Daniel. This case is not about my sanity, it's about control. And my father will not have it. Her voice cracked through every headline like lightning. The clip spread everywhere, reversing tides again. Ordinary women, daughters and sons wrote online, "She speaks for us." Amelia's defiance became something larger, a voice echoing rebellion for anyone who had been suffocated by family power. Inside the court, her father's lawyers droned cold accusations. They painted Daniel as opportunist, liar, vulture. They described Amelia as emotionally erratic, confused, blinded by romance. Amelia sat rigid. Every description hurt, scarred, attempted to erase. But when her turn came to testify, she rose with calm that stunned even herself. Hands washing tremors away, she spoke. I was dying in comfort. Every day of that life chipped me smaller. My father didn't see me, he saw deals. My fiancé didn't love me, he loved legacy. Yes, I ran. Yes, I fled my wedding. Not because I'm unstable. But because for once I refused to sell myself. Because for once I realized existence is not living if it's only obedience. The courtroom hushed. And as for Daniel Carter, he is not my manipulator. He is my witness. He saw me make a choice no one else believed I could make. He stood beside me because he knew freedom has a cost. And if loving the man who reminded me I am human makes me unstable, then I will wear instability as crown. The silence thundered. Even the judge's gavel seemed too delicate after her words. When they left the courthouse that day, Daniel caught her hand in the swirl of flashbulbs and whispered proudly, "That was stronger than anything I ever could have said." For a moment they stood tall amid the chaos, fire unquenchable. But Amelia knew the war had only shifted, not ended. Her father's face in the courtroom remained fury carved in stone. He would not relent easily. At night in Daniel's small apartment, she admitted her fear. What if he wins despite our truth? What if a system decides freedom is insanity? Daniel pulled her into his arms, his words throbbing certainty. Then we keep running. But not like before, panic into night. Together. On roads we choose. Until there's nowhere left he can touch us. Her chest pressed against his heartbeat, steady under weight she refused to let him carry alone anymore. The outcome was not certain. But what was certain was this. Amelia would not surrender. She was no longer the bride in satin bound to silence. She was the storm that had torn through it. And storms, once born, do not return to cages. The courtroom became their battlefield. Each hearing drew more spectators, more journalists hungry for drama. Every detail of Amelia's life was dissected in relentless public view. How she brushed her hair in childhood, what school she had attended, every photo ever taken with Matthew. Each detail was twisted into evidence of a fragile mind. But truth has a habit of breaking through lies if spoken clearly and consistently. Amelia learned to wield her own voice like armor. She testified without trembling, repeated without shame, telling anyone who would listen. I ran because I refused to live unloved and unrecognized. I chose Daniel because I wanted freedom, not because I was blind. That conviction began to ripple outside courtroom walls. Opinion pieces shifted tone. Perhaps the heiress's courage is not delusion but defiance. Feminist circles praised her bravery, holding banners outside hearings that read, "Amelia's choice is every woman's choice." Even journalists once eager to paint her as dramatic tabloid fodder began recognizing what she symbolized. A daughter fighting patriarchal control. Her father of course doubled down. He commanded lawyers to dig deeper, demanded psychiatrists testify to emotional instability. One cold afternoon his legal team presented excerpts from Amelia's childhood journals, pages that described lonely nights, unanswered doubts, twisting them into proof she'd always been unwell. Amelia trembled seeing her secrets weaponized. Daniel reached across the table and gripped her hand, his thumb steady against her knuckles. She lifted her eyes to the judge, her voice low but unbreakable. "Yes, those pages are mine," she admitted. "But they are not evidence of madness, they are evidence of suffocation. I was caged, unheard, so I wrote my heart down where at least ink would not silence me. If journaling is weakness, then perhaps the whole world ought to be deemed fragile. Gasps fluttered through the gallery. Even the judge's eyes softened with restrained understanding. Daniel, when called to testify, spoke not of love first, but of truth. I didn't know Amelia before that day. I didn't plan it. She ran, she jumped into my car, and she begged to choose her own direction. She wasn't delusional, she was alive. She's stronger than anyone gives her credit for. I've never manipulated her. Truth is, she's the one teaching me how to fight louder, how to stop hiding from my own family's legacy. The statements reverberated across headlines. Mechanic defends heiress, she's the strong one. Instead of predator, Daniel was recast as partner. Instead of prisoner, Amelia was framed as survivor. Then came the surprise ally. It was her cousin Clara, one she had grown up seeing at holiday dinners, always quiet at the edge of the room. Clara reached out privately and asked to meet. Skeptical but curious, Amelia agreed. They met in a small cafe far from the courthouse. Amelia arrived in a borrowed dress, heart hammering. Clara came alone, no entourage, no manipulation in her eyes, only exhaustion underlined with sympathy. I couldn't stand it anymore, Clara confessed quietly. The lies. The bullying. I have to tell you, I admire you. You did what the rest of us couldn't. You said no. Amelia blinked, disbelieving. But you're still in the family. You haven't? I'm still caged, Clara admitted. But watching you, it gave me hope. And maybe I can give you something in return. My father's been attending strategy meetings with yours. He said things he shouldn't around me. Things you should know. Clara slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of internal memos, rough notes revealing her father and Amelia's father conspiring to falsify financial connections between Daniel's garage and Amelia's runaway scandal, suggesting bribery that never happened. They're trying to entangle him in fraud, Clara explained. So if they can't erase you, they'll bury him. Shock shuddered through Amelia's chest. Why are you helping us? Clara's eyes brimmed. Because I'm tired. And because you're right, they don't love us. They own us. And I want to see at least one of us walk free. Amelia hugged her cousin fiercely before they parted, whispers trembling, "Thank you." Armed with Clara's documents, Daniel's attorney dismantled the fraud allegations within hours at the next hearing. Judges frowned at the baseless connections, journalists laughed the claims off networks. Amelia's father, though outwardly composed, showed the first crack in his steel. Anger twitched visible across his jawline. Back home that evening, Daniel and Amelia sat in the glow of their small table, sharing cheap takeout Chinese. Daniel raised his plastic cup of soda. To unexpected allies, he toasted. Amelia smiled wearily but with a sliver of hope. And to proving we're not as alone as we thought. Love inched fiercer now, matured not by fleeting kisses but by scars weathered together. They weren't just lovers. They were a team hardened by sleepless nights of strategizing, softened by quiet mornings making pancakes half-burned. Still, Amelia sometimes doubted late at night. What if this never ends? What if he drags us through years of trials, ruins you completely? Daniel brushed her hair back, whispering steady, "Then we'll keep choosing each morning. They can take money, reputation, comfort. But they can't take choice unless we hand it back." Her eyes pricked, heart captured by his implicit vow. The storm had not broken yet, but for the first time she could see the horizon. And through it she saw a path not of running, but of walking forward together. What Amelia didn't know was that fate still had one more twist. A revelation about Daniel's past her father planned to unleash, one calculated to shake the foundation of everything they had built. The next hearing should have been routine. More motions, more filings, more endless debate. But Amelia felt a sudden heaviness the moment she stepped into the courtroom. Her father sat with his attorneys, their smugness sharper than usual, like wolves that had already scented blood. She glanced at Daniel beside her. His jaw was tight. Not nerves, something else. When the gavel struck, her father's lead attorney rose with oiled certainty. "Your Honor, new evidence has come to light regarding Mr. Carter, the individual currently influencing Miss Amelia Morgan. We believe the court must hear this immediately." Before Amelia could react, the attorney produced a stack of documents, photos clipped to the top. Daniel didn't move. His hands curled into fists on the table, unshaken outwardly, but she felt the storm rolling beneath his composure. "Mr. Carter, also known as Daniel Carter Weston," the attorney announced. The name hit Amelia like a blade. "Weston." Gasps rippled through the court as the attorney continued, "is in fact the estranged son of financier Charles Weston, who presides over one of Chicago's largest holding companies. He rejected his inheritance years ago, changed his name unofficially, and has been living in disguise ever since. He is not the simple mechanic he pretends to be." The room erupted. Amelia sat stunned, her throat dry, words strangled against shock. "Daniel, a Weston? Part of another empire?" The attorney pushed further, voice slicing. "This revelation proves his deceit. He painted himself for Miss Morgan as ordinary, as working class, when in reality he willingly fled his wealth in an act of adolescent rebellion. We argue that Mr. Carter's manipulation of Amelia is part of a pattern, using falsehood, playing savior, destabilizing legacies. He is, in fact, no different from the alliances she claimed to flee." Amelia could barely hear through the roaring in her ears. She turned slowly toward Daniel. For the first time since she'd met him, his eyes did not sparkle with disarming humor or calm strength. They blazed with shame. The judge's gavel pounded. "Order." After the recess, whispering filled every corner of the hall. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters barked, "Amelia, did you know? Daniel, have you been lying?" Back in the conference room, Amelia faced him directly. "Is it true?" Daniel exhaled heavily, dragging hands through his hair, shoulders slumping under invisible weight. "Yes. My full name is Daniel Weston. Charles Weston's son. I walked away from it years ago, walked away and never looked back." Her chest ached. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" His voice cracked with regret. "Because I hated it. Because every memory of that life was chains, same as yours. I thought telling you would make me part of the very world you were running from. I wanted to be Daniel Carter, not a Weston. And with you I finally was." Tears brimmed hot in her eyes. "But when you hid it, you gave my father a weapon. You made me look like a fool when I defended you as ordinary." He reached for her hands, desperate. "I wasn't hiding out of deceit. I was hiding from fear. From the same gilded prison you tried to escape. Amelia, that road we met on, I was there because I refused to let legacy swallow me. Please believe me." Silence settled thick, only their ragged breaths breaking it. Amelia pushed his hands away gently, trembling. "I need to think," she whispered. That night in the garage apartment, Amelia lay awake long after Daniel slumped into restless sleep at the chair. Her heart clashed with warring truths. He had not been just a mechanic. He was heir who abandoned empire, same as she had fled. Could she blame him? Or should she brand his silence betrayal? But flashes returned. The way he taught her every tool patiently, the way he defended her in the courthouse, the way his lips trembled when he whispered love for the first time. Those weren't lies. They were him. What gnawed was not deceit, but the fact that she hadn't been allowed to choose with the full truth. By early morning, clamor outside returned. Journalists plastered Daniel's secret for headlines. Runaway bride finds love with hidden heir. Two rebels against legacy, love or strategy? Amelia buried her head, refusing to answer door knocks. Daniel approached quietly, eyes shadowed. "Say the word," he murmured hoarsely, "and I'll leave. Dragging my name with me. I'll take the flak. You can be free again, even from me." Her heart cracked. Even against shame, she couldn't stomach losing him. She shook her head fiercely. "No. Don't you dare leave. Don't let them convince you I ran from one prison only to hand myself to another. You chose me when I was ashes. I choose you even now." Tears broke wet across his cheek as he cupped her face. For a second, world quieted. "You forgive me?" "I don't forgive the silence overnight," she whispered honestly. "But I forgive the man you are. And I'll fight beside him, Weston name or not." The relief washed through him like rain on drought. He nodded tight. "Then we finish this together." When court assembled again the following week, Amelia stood beside Daniel openly, not behind. Letting the world see their unity was choice. Facing microphones, she declared, "My father wishes to paint Daniel's past as proof of deception. But truth? We both walked away from families who used us like assets. That's why we understand each other. His last name does not dishonor me. His choices honor me. And I will not be silenced simply because both men I come from, father and fiancé, used wealth as shackles. Daniel is not my manipulator. He is my equal. And I love him. The words cracked barriers in the gallery. The press carried them, spinning headlines anew. Runaway bride declares love with hidden heir. For some the twist was juicy gossip. For many it was proof of love rooted in the same rebellion that began in rain on a lonely road. Her father glowered, stripped of his sharp surprise weapon. The case teetered. Control faltered. But Amelia knew war wasn't over. They had one final mountain, the judgment itself looming like thunder. And yet for the first time she no longer feared. She and Daniel had walked roads separately once. Now they walked as one storm, forging toward eternity. The final hearing arrived on a bitterly cold morning. Outside the courthouse, protesters, reporters, and curious onlookers pressed together in chaotic throngs. Some carried signs praising Amelia, love is freedom, while others jeered about disgrace, spectacle, betrayal. The cameras buzzed like bees, their lenses trained on the courthouse steps as if history itself were about to unfold there. Amelia's father arrived first, shielded by his lawyers. He walked tall, his expression carved from anger and arrogance. To him, this day was meant to restore dignity, to crush the rebellion of a daughter who had dared to flee her gilded prison. Minutes later, Amelia and Daniel stepped from their modest car. No bodyguards, no entourage, just the two of them. Daniel's hand steadied her as microphones extended like spears. For a moment the cacophony threatened to drown her courage. But when she looked at him, saw the raw devotion in his storm-blue eyes, the pride in his softened smile, her fear melted into fierce resolve. Inside, when the gavel struck and the room hushed, all air seemed to crystallize. The judge's presence was firm, impartial, a wall against chaos. "This will be the final session," he announced, "before I deliver judgment." Her father's lawyers proceeded swiftly, voices sharp and theatrical. They painted Amelia as reckless, unstable, incapable of independent thought. They painted Daniel as liar, opportunist, a hidden heir who had manipulated her with false humility. Their words whipped like blades, backed by PowerPoint slides of photographs, headlines, highlighted sentences torn free from context. But Amelia had expected this storm. And storms no longer broke her, they defined her. When her turn at the stand came, she rose, shoulders squared in her simple blouse, no veil, no jewels, nothing but truth anchoring her voice. "I have listened," she began firmly, every syllable resonant. "Listened while my family twists ink from my journals, pries open mistakes, unearths old photos, desperate to prove me fragile. But fragility is not madness. Fragility is human, and humanity is something the men in my life have often mistaken for weakness." Her voice steadied further as she turned toward her father directly. "Yes, I ran. I ran because I refused to sell myself under the guise of unity. I ran because obligation is not love, alliance is not marriage, obedience is not life. I fled, not because I was confused, but because for the first time in 26 years I saw a cage. And I chose freedom." The gallery shivered with murmurs. Amelia pressed forward. "And Daniel Carter Weston, yes, now you all know his full name, did not deceive me. He saved me not by hiding what I ran from, but by showing me that chains exist everywhere and can be broken. We both walked away from families who traded children as assets. And together we built something stripped of profit and power. Something real. If that makes us unstable, then perhaps sanity is overrated." Her father snarled audibly from the plaintiff's bench, but the judge's gavel silenced him. Daniel took the stand after her, voice low but thick as rumbling thunder. "I left wealth because I hated what it demanded. I left my own father behind because he didn't care who I was, only how I could uphold empire. And the day I saw Amelia running down the road in a dress meant to shackle her, I recognized her fire." He turned, eyes locking warmly on her. From the beginning she never needed rescuing. She only needed someone to drive the car while she chose the direction. A wave of soft laughter fluttered through the court, even from reporters scribbling furiously. "Your Honor," Daniel finished, "my love for her is not manipulation. It is respect. It is choice. It is the only honest legacy I want attached to my name." Silence fell heavy when both finished. Papers rustled. Glare slithered across from Amelia's father and his team. But the air felt different, lighter somehow, shifting like a tide turning. Finally, the judge called recess to review his notes before final judgment. Amelia stepped out, shoulders quaking, but Daniel's steady hand never left hers. Her father cornered them in the hallway, fury trembling off him. His voice dripped venom low enough for microphones not to catch. "You've humiliated me for the last time, Amelia. If the law won't cage you, society will. You can't run forever." Amelia straightened, fire now her second nature. For the first time in her life, she didn't waver. "No," she said calmly. "I won't run anymore. I'll walk wherever I choose. And I'll never walk back to you." The look in his eyes wavered briefly, more shock than anger, as though he'd finally realized she was untouchable, immune to fear where once obedient silence kept her chained. That fearlessness was a cut deeper than any legal defeat. When recess ended, they returned to hushed courtroom. The judge's voice filled the silence. "I have considered all arguments. The question before me is whether Amelia Morgan is mentally unfit to govern her own life and whether Daniel Carter Weston has acted manipulatively. The evidence does not support these claims." Gasps rippled. The gavel struck. "Miss Morgan is hereby recognized as a free and capable individual, fully autonomous in choices regarding her life and associations. Furthermore, accusations of undue influence against Mr. Weston are dismissed as unfounded." Applause erupted from one side of the gallery, journalists scribbling furiously. Amelia's father sat frozen, color drained. The defeat burned his pride deeper than flame. But no legal trick could undo the truth now carved in record. Amelia was free. Tears welled unbidden. Daniel slipped his arm around her shoulders, whispering into her ear, "Told you storms don't break us." For the first time in months, her heart felt completely hers. She had walked into court a runaway bride tangled in shame. She walked out something else entirely. A woman vindicated, a woman no longer owned. And beside her, the man she loved not as rescuer but as equal. They stepped onto courthouse steps again as cameras flashed like fireworks, but this time Amelia smiled, not performance, not mask. She raised her voice clear above questions. "I left the altar because I wanted love, not convenience. Today proves no one should ever apologize for choosing it. And I have no regrets." The crowd roared approval. For a moment, Amelia glimpsed Daniel watching her from the corner of his smile, pride radiating, awe woven into blue eyes. She realized this fight had given them something legacy never could, not just freedom but foundation. The war was over. But the life they had chosen together was only just beginning. Weeks passed after the judgment, yet Amelia still felt weightless whenever she woke. The first mornings without dread were the strangest. She half expected to hear her father's demands rattling down hallways, to see Matthew waiting with a bland smile, to feel chains disguised as lace. But instead she awoke to bare sunlight spilling through Daniel's small window, grinding coffee in an old dented pot, and laughter setting her heart alight before noon. It was not luxury, but it was hers. The story did not vanish overnight, of course. Journalists still sniffed for scandal, newspapers still printed her picture beside headlines about runaway bride freed from tyranny of name. But the venom had dulled into fascination, then respect. People stopped pointing at her in grocery lines with ridicule. Women nodded quietly, admiration unspoken but unmistakable. A cashier whispered once, handing her change, "You're brave." Amelia carried those words more proudly than any diamond necklace from her old world. Her father withdrew entirely, his pride too wounded to allow concession. Amelia still sometimes feared his shadow, but Daniel always reminded her, prisons lose their power once you don't live inside them anymore. And slowly she believed it. The garage began to thrive again. Customers doubled, curious to shake the hand of the man who had stood by the infamous runaway bride, and stayed for his honest work, his easy smile. Amelia, once girl of parlors and rehearsed conversations, grew adept at answering phones, scheduling repairs, even handing Daniel tools before he asked. Grease stains no longer embarrassed her, they marked progress like medals. Sometimes when they locked the garage at night, she rubbed her fingers between the cracks of her nails and thought, this is what choosing feels like. Daniel, too, carried a new glow, though sometimes heavy shadows flickered in his gaze when his father's name was spoken. Once Amelia teased, I can't decide if I'll always picture you with grease on your cheek or in a tuxedo at some gala. His smirk was soft. Grease is honest. Galas are masked. I'll keep the one that doesn't suffocate. It was late on a rainy evening, the kind of gentle storm that reminded them both of beginnings, that Daniel finally set down his wrench and guided her outside under the drizzle. Remember that first night? He asked, standing in the road where the headlights had first fallen on her fleeing figure. She laughed gently, pulling his jacket closer around her. I thought you were crazy for stopping. He brushed damp curls from her face. I thought you were the bravest woman I'd ever seen, sprinting like fate itself had pushed you. She blushed, whispering, and now I know, he murmured, reaching into his pocket. You were running into my life. The small velvet box opened under raindrops, catching dull streetlight. Inside gleamed a simple ring, silver with a sapphire stone, modest but eternal. Unlike the diamonds her father might have chosen, this ring spoke quiet truth, chosen, not bought. Her breath caught hard. Amelia Morgan, Daniel said, voice thick, steady with devotion. You changed my life the moment you leapt into my car. You taught me storms don't end us, they shape us. I don't need a gilded name or inheritance. I just need the woman who chose me when the world told her she shouldn't. Will you marry me, truly, freely, on your terms this time, no cages attached? Tears blurred her sight. Rain mingled with them, streaming silver on her cheek. She whispered fiercely, yes. 1,000 times yes. His arms caught her, laughter and sobs colliding as he spun her lightly under the drizzle. A runaway bride no longer, but a woman who had found exactly where she belonged. The ring slipped onto her finger easily, perfectly, destiny singing quietly alongside raindrops. They kissed under stormlight, no cameras, no witnesses. Just two souls who had finally chosen not to flee but to stay. Months later, they wed not in marble halls, not before hundreds of calculating eyes, but in a meadow near the edge of town. The dress was simple. No veil, no corsets, barefoot on grass still damp with morning dew. Daniel wore no tuxedo, just a clean shirt and the smile of a man who had already found forever. Their vows were whispered, yet carried weight greater than any alliance of power. Words of love spoken openly, raw, unmasked. And when Amelia looked around at the handful of friends who truly cared, not dozens of critics but a family they had built by choice, she realized she was no longer running. She was walking steadily into a life she owned. Years later, when their daughter asked how her parents met, Amelia laughed softly and told her, I ran away from the wrong promise and straight into the right pair of headlights. Daniel always added with mock sternness, and don't ever try it yourself. But their daughter could still see in their eyes the storm-born love that had forged her family's beginning. Because Amelia Morgan had once left an altar, but what she found on the road was not shame, it was destiny. And the stranger who picked her up had not only changed her life. He had given her the one life she had always longed for, hers.